This is an official Landbot podcast.
Hi everyone, once again, this is Chris from Landbot. And today we are here with another customer story. And today is a very special one. I don't always say this, but you'll understand why in just a moment. So today with us, we have Nick Scott, who's the head of digital, like Doctors Without Borders Spain. Hi, Nick.
Hi.
So maybe you can introduce yourself and your organization and what you do. So I believe everyone knows what Doctors Without Borders is, Médicos Sin Fronteras for Spanish-speaking countries. But if you can introduce, yourself, your role, and what you do at Doctors Without Borders, that would be great.
Sure. So I'm Nick Scott. I'm head of digital in Doctors Without Borders Spain, and effectively, as you say, Doctors Without Borders is running operations in humanitarian crises across the world, and from Barcelona, a certain number of those are run directly from the offices in Barcelona, or they're kind of managed from the offices in Barcelona. Mm-hmm. So I have two kind of aspects to my role. One aspect is that I support when issues come up or questions come up around how to do digital in operational contexts. I have a member of the team, and I support teams in, for example, how to use Facebook to engage local populations and so on. And probably the much larger side of my role at the moment is focused on Spain itself. So working with our fundraising department, our communications department, and also our HR department to help them in terms of achieving their objectives within Spain, using digital tools, digital channels, digital ways of working.
Yeah, that sounds like the perfect position to hold a Landbot account. And I was saying that this is very special because I happen to be a partner of Doctors Without Borders for 3 years now. It's crazy how you start collaborating with such an organization, and 3 years in, you realize that you are able to collaborate in a deeper way and be able to make the world a better place, even if it sounds like a topic. But it's super exciting, and I'm really happy to be here with you, Nick, and you telling us more about what your experience with conversational experiences been like. So I would love to start with for the beginning. You're the head of digital for Doctors Without Borders in Spain. What are the classic set of tools that you normally use for all those important initiatives like fundraising and getting partners and getting donations? So before Landbot came in, we can talk about that later. So what was your setup like? I assume it was like social media and also newsletters. If you can tell us a bit more about what was your stack like before Landbot, and how you came up with this idea of taking it a step further and trying out different approaches to experiences.
Sure. As you'd expect, we have all of the basics. A large amount of our income in terms of donations and new members joining come through the website. MSF in Spain is a very large NGO. It's one of those kind of top NGOs in Spain, and that means that we receive a lot of spontaneous people signing up who read about us in the press or so on. So a large part of our effort is focused on the website to kind of collect and channel that interest into ways of collaborating with MSF. We also have a very strong social media presence. We have strong accounts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, as you'd expect. We've been expanding in the last year to look at new channels and how we can use new channels. We're testing this year. We decided to look a lot more in detail at messaging and messaging related channels, and so we've been running pilots of regular donor acquisition through Facebook Messenger, for example, which actual conversations, not bots in that case, with real people, and also looking at things like chatbots as part of it. So I think I would say that the digital team at MSF Spain is less than 3 years old. We've spent a lot of the first while on reviewing getting the basics right, getting the infrastructure in place, making sure that we still have to do a new website, but working on the current website and bringing our social media engagement levels up to scratch and growing our base and so on. And this year has been a year where we've still got work to do on that, but we started to look at new and exciting opportunities that could build the base for the future. And they're also a key part of my role is it's not to grow a large digital team, it's to introduce change into other teams and offer and let them connect tools that they didn't know maybe existed, or certainly didn't know how they work, connect that into their work. So that's kind of been one of my key focuses, to try and find things that work for recruitment, that work for engaging existing donors, which is a very big part of our work. We have nearly 500,000 regular donors in Spain, so it's a large base to be talking to. And also, obviously, trying to persuade and inspire others to become regular donors and to deepen their commitment to MSF and effectively to the people that we're supporting in the field.
Yeah, it's super interesting. You're like in the front line of testing out new approaches, new technologies, new tools, and sharing with the rest of the teams in MSF, and that's great. So you mentioned an experiment or a pilot, one of them with Messenger, that involved like real humans on chat. So what was your experience with instant messaging in general? I mean, not only with chatbots, that pilot with Messenger, and what made you think, all right, it might be a good time to explore chatbots, to explore these automations that can help us scale up our communications? So if you can tell us a bit more about that.
Well, I mean, I'd love to say that the MSF in Spain is a early adopter of things, but I don't think we necessarily are. I don't think that's necessarily our role. Actually, I think the saying imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. A lot of it definitely holds true. A lot of the things that we've not done because we were the first to do it. We one of the things I try to do is make sure I'm abreast of what is going on and what people are trying in different countries, and take things that sound interesting and sound like they might work for us and try them here. So the regular donor acquisition through Messenger, that's a project that I first heard about through Greenpeace UK, and considering the focus we have within Spain on conversations as a way of converting interest. You know, we have lots and lots of people that are face-to-face fundraisers. We have a large telemarketing team. It felt like it might be something where we have the capacity, and we just need to understand better how to bring that capacity to bear on the channel. Things like chatbots as well. I mean, we'd run a very home built chatbot last year within Messenger, just as a test to learn a little bit about it. But we were coming to a point where we knew that. I mean, I think that one of the things we learned from that test was the technology can exist, but there's an art to it. There's an art to the conversation. Sometimes there's an art to the flow. There's an art to keeping people engaged, and to thinking the kinds of things that work best and how to structure that conversation. And so actually our interest in chatbots came more because an agency came to us with that experience and that expertise, and less on the technology side. And I think that's quite important. Sometimes it's very easy to jump into things just because technology exists. Actually, sometimes the support is not where you might traditionally expect it. You don't need support so much in using their technology. You need support in understanding the strategy and the way to do it well.
Yeah, you made a very interesting point. Because I think that what's happening with chatbots today happened with websites some time ago, like maybe 10 to 20 years ago. Having a website was the thing. I mean, it doesn't really matter if you get a strategy around it, or if you even created a nice website, a website that converts or that provides the right information. And I think that that's sort of what's been happening with chatbots in the past years. Like, it was a new thing, it was a new technology. Everybody wanted to have one, but they might not, think more in the future, like what are chatbots here for? What's the conversation? What's the purpose of these conversation? Should I? And you should definitely constantly iterate it and plug it into your strategy rather than having it as a standalone. So you can release a press kit and say, yeah, we use chatbots. So you mentioned that you discovered, or well, you rediscovered chatbots through an agency. I think I know you talking about, and what was the first impression like? How were chatbots reintroduced to you guys, and what you thought it could be interesting for?
So I guess the agency, as often happens with good agencies, they pitched to us, and it was they initiated the conversation, and I think the thing that I took away from the conversation was that I felt they'd made that jump to understand not just the technology, but also the sector. They understood they understood the specificities of donation as a particular ask, or of lead generation, but within the not-for-profit sector, and what we're trying to do with leads, the kinds of promise we can make to a potential lead or to a potential donor, and then they had a very strong sense of understanding of how both language, but also data and analysis are essential to making a chatbot a success. So I think I felt very I felt confident after meeting them that together we could lay out a path to using chatbots in a way that was going to allow us to we would know how to iterate. We'd start with a good product. We'd start with a chat that works well, that's very, very well thought through in terms of the flow of conversation and how to use different aspects of marketing and conversational marketing to grip people, and then to keep their interest and keep them engaged, and then to ask them to take action potentially. And so I was very excited at that point. I think I do get excited by new things. That's just something that comes for me. But I got excited because it's actually just as important as having a new thing is having a route to taking that forward. And within the conversation with them, they were very clear on the pros and cons of different ways of doing it. We talked about, for example, doing things directly in Facebook Messenger or in other tools. We talked a little bit about things like WhatsApp, and so we had a kind of a very strong conversation that helped me to identify where I could immediately fit chatbots into our work, and where it kind of fitted the objectives we had, fitted the kind of flexibility and the kind of a strategic approach we have. I mean, just to elaborate on that, I think one of the things that we as an organization have tried to work hard to develop is links between how we communicate and how we fundraise. In the world of broadcast, fundraising quite often was a very focused TV ad or a very focused poster where the ask is central. You have maybe, I mean, and this is not so much MSF, but you have the kind of the poster of the emaciated child from Africa. Everyone has that image in their mind, And what you're actually doing is you're just doing the ask. You're not really doing anything to raise awareness of what's behind the problems, to engage people, to tell stories. That story is untold. That child's story is untold, and you're using a child in, I think, not a positive way. The thing that I appreciated about the potential of chatbots is actually the way that you can, much more than a landing of a website or anything else, you can respond to how you can tell the story and respond to what the person who's reading the story or interacting with the story, what they say, how they respond. You can tell more if they're interested, or if they're keen to jump to action, you can jump them to action. I think that kind of flexibility, for me, really felt like a good match to what we're trying to do in terms of combining communications and fundraising, so that we bring in people as donors and regular donors, because they understand not just how their money or their support helps, but also because they really understand where it's going and how it's going to be used and what the need is. They understand the story behind the need.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think that all of us have this image in this head, like, this sort of ad or poster or TV ad where you see exactly that, like a lot of poverty, and you just your call to action, but without much context. And and I completely agree that the power of stories, of being able to engage at different levels, because there might be some people that are willing to donate straight away, but some others might need this or that. So if we are able to curate that content and deliver it in the most efficient way possible, that's definitely gonna make the difference. So let's try to link this up with conversational experiences or chatbots, and what your ideas were after this conversation with your agency and all these new possibilities you had in place. Like, what was the first thing you thought, or what was the first project you wanted to try these on?
So I guess the first project, I'm going to now talk about February 2020, which feels like a world away from where we are now. So back then, we were thinking of using chatbots as we didn't know exactly what we would do, but we were planning to release a letter to donors and also a series of online content pieces, and I think it was around HIV, but I can't remember what it was around, some aspect of our HIV and HIV treatment operations. And so essentially at that point, we'd penciled in the idea that we could do something more interactive for our donors. We could tell the story in a different way for our donors using a chatbot. So I don't know where it would have gone, because we didn't get to the design process, but it probably would have been some element of kind of choose your own adventure type decision trees, and asking people to decide, and maybe with quiz elements. I'm not entirely sure, but that's kind of where our thinking was at. That we could do something to engage our donors in a different way to any way that we'd done it previously. But then obviously March 2020 came around, and we had not yet signed a contract with the chatbot agency. We were planning to do that in April, but they got in contact very shortly after Spain went into lockdown, and said, asked as others did, is there something you want to do? Your MSF had, by this point, was looking at becoming active in Spain and actually opening operations in Spain for the first time ever. So treating Spain as a humanitarian emergency, which was something that we'd never expected to be necessary, frankly. And it's not just Spain; other countries in Europe have also had MSF active, and indeed in America too. And more or less at around the same time, we were noticing two things. We were noticing a lot of conversations among our followers and on social around mental health, anxiety, and so on. And we're also noticing internally our psychological support unit was starting to produce new materials, primarily in the first instance, actually targeted at staff in the offices. Using their experience from having worked providing psychological support in the field, in human conflict environments, in other epidemics, past epidemics, they were starting to produce new materials, but for staff to help them adjust to things like teleworking and the stress and strain of lockdown. So we kind of, when the agency got in contact, we thought, okay, this is an opportunity. Actually, we can do something that we have the content ready. We have clear interest. We also have a place to put it where it actually offer a lot of value, in that our coronavirus web pages and our epidemic web pages were seeing something in the region of 5,000 to 10,000 visits a day. They were getting extremely strong search engine positioning at that point. And so had a lot of traffic. And so we combined all of that and embarked on the project with the agency to build a mental health chatbot, using key tips for people who are in lockdown at home and on their own.
Yeah, I love it how you sort of had this initiative internally, and you thought of reutilizing that for all the community outside of MSF. And what was it like? Like, what was how was that process of sort of transforming that content into something interactive and sharing it with the audience? Like, what was the creation process like, the iteration process, the testing? How was your experience with this switch? I mean, let's deliver this content, let's do it with a new technology or a new approach, and how was it like?
I mean, we were obviously very lucky in that we had an agency who knew how to do quite a lot of this, because quite frankly, I don't think without them we would have got anywhere close. And if it had relied a lot on my team, we wouldn't have made it, because the reality is that most of the team were completely overwrought with the amount of content we were having to publish, amount of change we were having to manage. Suddenly everything, whether fundraising or comms, became somewhat digital. We had our face-to-face teams were no longer on the streets. Other teams who had been planning to send mail could no longer send a direct mail, because obviously the post wouldn't arrive. And so the team had become a very central part of our functioning, but also a bit of a bottleneck. Luckily, the agency were able to take the content and really do a lovely job at turning it around into something that fits the format. So they personalized it. We connected them to the person who'd written it, who's the head of our psychosocial support unit, who'd written the guide, one of the initial guides. We showed them a few videos that other parts of Doctors Without Borders internationally had released, including one of a psychologist from our Hong Kong team who talked about some tips. And they kind of combined that all to create a set of, I think it's 7 or 8, maybe 8 different emotions that people might be feeling. And then taking a storytelling approach to running through how different fictional people dealt with anxiety or stress or insomnia or other kind of emotional reactions to the situation in which we were living. So, a lot of that work they handled, and they did a lot of the setup. Where we really came in was after, in terms of firstly thinking about how to push it. But then also we realized quite quickly we had something very valuable on our hands in terms of people really wanted to use it, and so we created a lot of work for ourselves, because we then started trying to sell it as an idea to the rest of the organization, and had to do a lot of coordination with Portuguese speakers, with Italian speakers, with other speakers who have all created their own versions of the same chatbot.
Wow.
Because it was just so, it felt like the right response for MSF at this particular point in time, and the right thing to do for our supporters who are often there for us, and we needed to be there for them.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Yeah, I personally know the different chatbots that you have created from SF, and and it's a brilliant job. I have to tell you. And I wanted to ask you a bit more about what your expectations were like. So you released such a project, multi-language, telling stories about these different emotions with this storytelling approach from the MSF. I mean, you being the head of digital in Spain, what your expectations were like? What were you what were you measuring? What were you expecting from these chatbots? Like, were you just looking for conversion, like time on page, or what was the impact you wanted to have with this initiative compared to other ways of distributing this sort of content, and what it turned out to be?
I mean, I guess a large part of me was very interested in people using it, and getting past that kind of first couple of
Yeah.
engagement metrics, making sure that people get past that first conversation. Quite important for me was to know that there were a lot of people who clicked through and seen at least one of the emotions, and the stories behind one of the emotions. That meant that means that it's been of value to them. And then the second set of indicators for us were around leads. So we produced a short guide that was a downloadable and offer that was sent to people who provided their contact details. And we do that because we want to build our supporter base, and we want to be able to contact more people who can help us in whatever way they can in future. And so I think it was for me, it was really important that we do these things because we want to be because we rely on our supporters to make a difference. And so we the way that we help people is by helping our supporters in this case.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it makes a ton of sense to start with the basics. Let's guarantee some engagement. That's the number one thing we should go after when implementing new technologies like chatbots. And then let's move from there. And once you guarantee that your users are engaged, that they understand the format, that they want to consume content in that format, then you can just keep building the next phases of that funnel, and and ultimately getting leads and probably donors, and that's great to hear. And all right, so this project is still running, if I'm not wrong, but I would like to ask you about next steps you got in mind. Maybe it's just iterating this first project, or maybe you already got some extra ideas in the roadmap. If you can share the audience some of your next steps with chatbots.
Yep. So this one went very well. The first chatbot that we had, we had 100,000 people, I think, come through it. We sent it to our donor list. We had some particular highlights were that a colleague of mine and I both sent it to our WhatsApp groups for parents in of our children's classes, and from those two links, it went to 16,000 people via WhatsApp, including a few thousand in Mexico and Guatemala. So it kind of went WhatsApp viral, which was brilliant. because I think it talks to how much it was talking to people's interests at that time.
Absolutely.
So we have tried to kind of build on it. Obviously, part of what we do is we renew it on a regular basis. Initially, the journey initially started with the stories, then a lead, and then actually it finished with a donation ask. So it asked,
Hmm.
it told you had a chance to choose to hear a bit more about the work MSF was doing at that point in Spain,
Hmm.
and then a donation ask at the end. And more or less, we ran Facebook ads for quite a while, and more or less the Facebook ads were covered by the donations we were receiving. So the leads that we were getting before that were effectively we weren't paying for them.
Hmm.
Now we've just released a second one, but this
Uh-huh.
is targeted rather than at people and about their own stresses. It's targeted about at parents about the stresses their kids can be under. So we've just
Hmm.
exited, or we're exiting lockdown. But a lot of children in Spain and in other societies have not had any interaction. If there's single kids from single parent families, they've had interactions with brothers or sisters. They've
Hmm.
been cooped up at home. They've not their school has suddenly finished, and this can lead to a whole load of emotional strain too for them. It can be quite hard for
Hmm.
parents to deal with. So we've just released a chatbot a few days ago that tackles this area. It's in the same line
Hmm.
as the first one, but focused on this one. And in between, we also released another chatbot that was much more focused on a particular fundraising item, and it was a chatbot to we have a fundraiser platform in MSF Spain,
Hmm.
and the chatbot was to help people very quickly create a fundraiser for their birthday. Obviously, a lot of people in lockdown cannot
All right.
receive presents, so
Hmm.
this chatbot was just help them by it asked them their name, asked them to upload a photo, that kind of thing, and then it automatically created a fundraiser for them. The main thinking behind that was that our platform can sometimes be a bit it's not when you're presented with a landing page and there's lots of information, it can be a bit hard to decide whether and how to proceed. And we wanted to try and take as many steps out of the journey and
Hmm.
set up the fundraiser with as the minimum amount of information and set it up for them, so that they can start sharing the fundraiser and getting their friends to participate. So that's where we're at the moment, and we're looking at now at new types of chatbots where we're evaluating whether we do a chatbot for recruitment. So one of the things MSF is not volunteers, the doctors that go to the field. It's doctors, qualified doctors,
Hmm.
professionals, and nurses, and a variety of other non medical jobs. And so one of the things we're looking at is a chatbot to explain to help guide people um, through becoming an MS or through applying to become an MSF staff member. Um,
Hmm.
so that's one of the next ones we're planning in now.
So that's super interesting, Nick. And I love the idea of creating chatbots that allow you to create a fundraising campaign for your birthday or for any other occasion. And I think that these sort of initiatives make a lot of sense when you're trying to do things differently. And what I love the most is that all the different projects we've been talking about today are so different. Like it's not only about getting leads. It's way more than that. It's about building engagement, telling stories. Um, I mean, now you were mentioning the hiring or recruiting part of a chatbot, and I think it's a great use case, and we got many companies using Landbot for that. So I love to hear how you're planning to expand so horizontally the different use cases that a chatbot can cover. So thanks for that. Well, we can just finish this great conversation. I don't know if you want to share a final message, or if you want to tell the audience what they can do or where can they go if they want to find out more about MSF or Doctors Without Borders. If you can recommend any resource or website they can visit to collaborate and learn more.
Yeah, sure. So I'm assuming we have people from all around the world.
Yeah.
There's definitely going to be an MSF near you. So either under the name Doctors Without Borders, Médecins Sans Frontières, Médicos Sin Fronteras, find us, find out more about work. I mean, the work of my colleagues across the organization do daily. It's incredible work. Is incredibly needed. The humanitarian crises that we come into, not always, but sometimes we're the first there, and we go to places that are further and harder to reach. It's inspiring to see stories of hospitals being set up in the middle of nowhere. And the thing that we all have in common as human beings is our need for health and care, and no one, whatever the situation, wherever they're born, whatever they're born into, really should be denied that health and care and the ability to live and to live well. And so that's what MSF is there for. It's there to do that. It's also there to ensure that we speak about what we see, and that we all understand more about the world that we live in, and know that these crises exist, and know that these stories exist, and these people who persevere in the face of all sorts of uncertainty and difficulty that we see in our projects, but that we are able to thankfully help. But we can only help obviously with support, and support of people all around the world. So please do find out more, and if you're willing, a donation always goes to helping save lives and stop suffering.
Yeah, the greatest cause of all. So thank you so much, Nick. It's been an honor talking to you and sharing with the world a little bit more about how MSF is using new technologies to make the world a better place. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
And to everybody else, thanks for being there, and see you in the next customer story. Bye-bye.